Morning, everybody. Jim Ostrowski with the Liberty Moving Podcast. It's election day. Let's go. So I know everybody's waiting to hear this podcast before they decide who to vote. Actually, this podcast is directed to libertarians, like my podcast the other day directed to Catholics. Anybody else is welcome to listen. But the reasoning applies to libertarians. And the question is, who should libertarians vote for today? I know it's a little late, but I'm busy. So, a little background. The liberty movement, first of all, when I say libertarians, I mean small L libertarians. That is somebody who believes in libertarian philosophy. If you're a member of the party, that makes you a capital L libertarian. And that's not the same thing. There have been, I won't digress on that, but I'm talking about small L libertarians, people who believe in libertarian philosophy, whether or not they're a member of the party. So, there was an article in Reason magazine by, his last name is Doherty. He's a well-known libertarian writer. And he kind of, and I'm not really rebutting his article, which I only scanned, but he made the point that both candidates are bad and libertarians shouldn't vote or should vote for Chase Oliver or whatever, or do a write-in vote. So I certainly disagree with that. So let's go through, I want to go through the arguments, trying to think if there's anything else in way of background. So first of all, let me just talk about voting generally. We have the system of voting, I guess, because nobody can think of a better way of making decisions. Well, there is a better way of making decisions. It's called the fucking free market, see, where you vote and you get what you want if you can afford it, which is a great incentive to get up in the morning and work your ass off so you can afford the crap you want. So there is an alternative. But as far as we're stuck with this current system of voting, there's many problems with voting that I talk about. I think I have the most trenchant critique of voting in the libertarian corpus of literature in, oddly enough, Exposing the Two Big Lies of the Gun Control Movement, which, by the way, nobody's reading and nobody's buying it, nobody's reviewing it. I don't know what I have to do, folks. I destroyed the gun control movement, which has existed since 1960. I'm sorry, I don't have an army. I don't have a public relations firm. I don't have $1 million. I don't even have $10,000. Nobody's reading the book. My fault. I know everything's my fault. Be a Buddhist. Everything's my fault. I do live that Stoic philosophy. Everything's my fault. But still, every once in a while, I like to gripe about it. In any event, so there's so many fallacies involved with voting. You know, I have a bunch of sort of lines. Is there a lazier way to improve society than voting? That's a rhetorical question. Vote harder. That's sort of a libertarian joke. But the aphorism I invented myself, and I use it constantly, is voting is like trying to stop a hurricane with your breath. Voting is like trying to stop a hurricane with your breath. By the way, I live in New York. Trump's going to lose by 15 points. He's not contesting the state. So, you know, my vote doesn't matter in terms of who's going to win the election. I'll talk about who I'm voting for in a second. You vote in secret. So how's anybody supposed to know, like, why you voted for them? And the whole thing makes no sense. You bear no responsibility for voting. It's free. That you bear no costs. You should bear costs for your behavior, and that's how the free market works. And that's why libertarianism is the superior philosophy. Now, our politics are effed up. We have no strategy, except for mine. libertymovement.org. Best political logo in the last 500 years. So, some people say you have an obligation to vote. I think that's silly. you have an obligation to vote. What if you don't like what's on the menu? What if you fulfill your civic? I got to cross the street here. What if you fulfill your civic obligation to vote, and they don't do what you say? They don't do what they say. Again, there's so many problems. So there's no obligation to vote. Vote if you want to. I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote. Vote any way you want to. It's not my business, really. But I have the right to express my opinion, and so I'm really talking to libertarians here, and I'm going to go down. I have a checklist in my pocket. I rarely have any notes. If you don't vote, are you consenting? No. If you do vote, are you consenting to anything? No, you're not. That's all bullshit. See my book. If you vote for the winner, are you consenting? No. I remember one time, I've been a vegetarian for 40 years. I went into a restaurant. I had no vegetarian food. So I voted for salad and oil and vinegar. It was really gross. That was my dinner. I was eating dinner with my parents. I voted for that. I didn't want it. It was the only thing on the menu. It was a forced choice. So there's a lot of myths about voting. One more methodological point before I get into what this is about. I forgot what I was going to say. Jeez, that really happens. So what was I going to say? Oh well, should have had more coffee this morning. So I'll think of it on the podcast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through, I forgot. I remember what it is. So voting is a form of political activity. It's you could say it's under the rubric of strategy and tactics. So here's the thing a lot of libertarians don't realize. Libertarian theory is one thing. And yes, if you're a libertarian, you should stick to your theory. That's just being logically consistent, and it's having moral integrity. Sometimes being a libertarian costs you big time, like my life. But I stuck to it because I have moral integrity. But when it comes to political strategy, tactics, activities, including voting, these are all pragmatic issues. So you as a libertarian, I remember Murray Rothbard, he didn't vote, but I think he endorsed Lyndon Johnson. I mean, crazy as it sounds, because he thought Johnson was the better anti-war candidate. Now, he turned out to be wrong, but he was going on the information at the time. That doesn't mean, that was a pragmatic decision. So people shouldn't beat up libertarians for who they vote for. They're free to choose whoever they want. But I think they should make that vote based on the facts and based on logic. So, and that's what I'm going to do now. So, we got two candidates who can win, Trump and Harris. There's 7 swing states, but actually, the libertarians have created another swing state, New Hampshire, and also Virginia, Minnesota, and New Mexico, I think, yes, are also in play. So there's 11 states that count tonight. If you're not in one of those states, it doesn't fucking matter who you vote for unless you're obsessed with who wins the popular vote. So in those 39 states and DC, there's like 3 libertarians in DC. You can vote, on principle, which is fine. You don't have to vote on principle. You can vote for pragmatic reasons. And I don't think anybody has the right to really criticize your vote. So we're talking about 11 states. If you're a libertarian in those 11 states, particularly New Hampshire, because keep in mind, if Trump wins the southern swing states and Kamala wins the northern swing states, New Hampshire decides the election. And there's a lot of libertarians in New Hampshire, and it's a very small state. So, if you're in those swing states and you're not particularly desirous of doing a symbolic vote for the Libertarian Party, then the question is, you're going to vote for Harris or Trump? I don't think this is close. I'm just going to rattle off, and I'm not rebutting Doherty's article. Read it if you want. But I agree with Woods and Tom Woods and Dave Smith and Dennis Pratt up in New Hampshire. And now there's the alliance with Ron Paul, bringing Ron Paul on as an advisor. He hasn't formally endorsed Trump. I'm definitely in that camp. I've been in the camp that for years the Libertarian Party's been split between the pro-Trump people who think that Trump is a positive development in the Republican Party, and that's me, and the people who do not. But basically it's the Beltway Libertarians. The Beltway Libertarians are obsessed with open borders, even though that's not the Libertarian position. And they fund Reason magazine. And they're also obsessed with free trade. Now, I agree with free trade, too, but I'm not a single-issue voter. And Kamala Harris is not for free trade. So I'm going to talk about free trade in the checklist. So I think that's the overview type of issues. Let me get right into it. These are the issues I think should be important to a libertarian. And I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. War. Well, obviously, how you doing? War, obviously, we had peace under Trump. Now, was he perfect? No. But he did tell the generals to get the fuck out of Syria, and the generals, stabbed him in the back. He's criticized the forever war, forever foreign war philosophy. That's how he made his bones, attacking George W. Bush on Iraq. So, on the issue of war and peace, there's no question at all. Kamala Harris has presided over the slaughter in Gaza. I'm not going to get into the intricacies of that, but she has agreed with that policy. We fund that. We're paying for the murder of people in this country. We shouldn't do it. America first, okay? And when I say America first, I fucking mean America first, not second. I don't give a shit what country you're talking about. So she's wrong on that. She's even worse on Ukraine. 1 million Ukrainians have been killed. 300,000 Russian conscript troops have been killed. Billions of American dollars are going over there. And nobody even talks about it. I fault Trump for this. Why isn't Trump calling her out on Ukraine specifically? So if she wins, that slaughterhouse 5 is going to continue. So that's war. Right to bear arms. You can say what you will about Trump. Some people say, bump stock and this and that, with some stupid regulation. He appointed judges who, at least in theory, strengthen the Second Amendment. Kamala Harris is a gun grabber. She's going to grab your semi-automatic rifles. And she's just horrible. And the number one issue in politics in the last 10,000 years is, do the citizens have a right to defend themselves? Obviously, they do. She does not agree with that, and she will take your Second Amendment rights away. And if she says to the contrary, because she's done a lot of polling and focus groups, she's a liar. Why would you believe anything this woman says? Okay, right to bear arms. Spending, which is inflation. So spending is inflation. Trump really was a big spender. It's very disappointing his first term. I don't think the second term is going to be the same thing. How you doing? He was a big spender. But and spending, when it's funded by the Fed creating money out of thin air, causes inflation. If you borrow, I'm not getting into technicalities. Not all spending causes inflation, but the spending we do is deficit spending, and yes, that causes inflation because a lot of it is funded by phony money. I'm not going to get into that lecture here. Biden-Harris just busted the budget. They busted the budget, and they were the proximate cause, as we lawyers like to say, of the massive inflation, which is really just a form of theft. It's a form of taxation. So spending, inflation, Trump wins. Abortion. Well, I can talk a lot about abortion. There's an understanding in the libertarian movement that libertarians can be pro-choice or pro-life. Because the reason is, libertarian doctrine doesn't clearly lead to one conclusion or another. But Harris is for, and Trump has said basically we leave it up to the states. Harris would basically create a right of abortion to the point past viability partial birth abortion, this fetus survives, the baby survives in the operating room, and God knows what they do next. So I'm going to call that a tie. Tariffs and taxes. Now, the Beltway people get all excited about tariffs. I think tariffs are dumb. Tariffs are a form of taxes. But I'm not all that upset, because I think a lot of what Trump talks about when he talks about tariffs, or a lot of what he's driving at, is to allow our goods to go into other countries. So I think a lot of that's rhetoric. But the bottom line, at the end of the day, I don't think it matters a great deal how the government raises money. What matters is the total level of taxation. And that the level of taxation is actually what government spends. It's what government spends. I think it's pretty clear from his past performance, from her past performance, and from his future promises and his reshuffling the deck of his advisors. He's gotten rid of a lot of the creeps, and he's got way much better people in there now. Trump's going to be better on spending. Trump's going to be better on taxes / tariffs. Regulations, no brainer. Trump did get rid of a lot of regulations in his first term. Should have done a lot more. Hopefully Musk will assist with that in the second term. The lockdown. Okay, Trump got rolled by Fauci, but the actual lockdown was at the state level. And Trump wanted the lockdown to end after a month or two? I'm not going to slice and dice this. We all lived through it. So Trump was like, a C on the lockdown, had a new disease, had some excuses, got rolled by Fauci. Kamala is a fucking F. I mean, she's the type of person, she's being supported by all these vicious governors who put masks on kids. Okay, so Trump wins the lockdown. Free speech, Trump, he's babbled a little bit about this and that and the other thing, but the bottom line is the judges he's appointed will uphold the right of free speech. It's a core issue of political speech. I think that's true. But also, it's obvious that the Biden and Harris administration created a bureau to actively suppress free speech, and I believe they were involved in what happened to Elon Musk down in Brazil. There's so many things in the State Department. I'll get into this when I get my book out. I don't know if I have enough time for this podcast. So, free speech, Trump wins. Reached out to libertarians. Let's talk about, that's not really a policy issue. I'm going to do immigration, and then I'm going to talk about 2 closing points before I announce who the hell I'm voting for. Not that anybody cares. Who cares who I'm voting for? Immigration. Okay, this is where the Beltway libertarians who are for open borders, and their paymasters who are for open borders, the remaining Koch brother, they can't stand Trump. Okay, so here's my position. The proper libertarian position on this was stated in a book by a guy from Buffalo named James Ostrowski, A Libertarian Solution to the Immigration Problem, immigration issue, whatever it was. So libertarian, the libertarian position is people should be free to move around the world as long as they're not criminals, terrorists, as long as they're not sponging off of welfare, and as long as they're not intervening in local political affairs by voting or just becoming a citizen because they had a baby across the border. So that's the correct libertarian position. I'll debate any other libertarian who thinks I'm wrong. Nobody has challenged me yet. And neither candidate holds that position. Running a little bit out of park space. Just an extra point. I could actually favor Trump on this, and the Beltway libertarians would have a heart attack. What is the Biden-Harris administration doing? They actively violated all the immigration laws of the United States by conspiring to bring in massive numbers of unvetted, whatever they are, from the third world. Why? Well, as Elon Musk showed, most of them went to red states, for one thing. So in the future, whatever, they have kids or they get amnesty and are allowed to vote, there won't be any red states. There won't be any red states. So Elon Musk is correct. Because of Biden-Harris's immigration policies, they're basically electing a new electorate. They're socially re-engineering the population. So even though I'm going to say this is a tie, really what Harris's immigration policies are quite odious, and will, in my opinion, lead to not dire consequences, but basically the end of the country, because the country's the people. It's not the land, it's not the real estate. The country's the people, and if you're re-engineering the population, you've basically gotten rid of the country. So, not to put too fine a point, I just say all that to drive the Beltway people crazy if they listen to the podcast. Let me talk about two final things, and I'll wrap it up. Reached out to libertarians. Well, we know that Trump reached out to libertarians. I was there. I was in the room. Trump promised to name a cabinet member. He's going to pardon Ross. I can't remember his name. Last name is terrible. He listed a lot of other. Wow, it's getting windy. He listed a lot of other. I'll just talk louder. He listed a lot of other libertarian policy points. I'm not going to get into those now. But he's brought in, so Ramaswamy is kind of a quasi-libertarian. He's in there. Let me put it this way. I don't know anybody who knows Kamala Harris. I know 3 people. If I had an emergency, or I had some important news or whatever, I know 3 people personally who know Trump personally. And I'm on good terms with those people. So there is a door open to the libertarian movement. I'm going to talk in my, I'm going to make a big announcement tonight. I'll talk about that right at the end of this. The Libertarian Party has failed, folks. It's time to try to adopt different strategies. And I'm not necessarily saying that there's only one strategy is to work with Trump. There's other strategies. I'm going to announce those tonight. So Harris has made no effort to reach out to libertarians. She says she's going to have people who disagree with her, blah, blah, blah. Right, it's easy to flap your gums. She hasn't done it. She's had plenty of time in her career to work with libertarians. I'm not aware of anything she's done to ingratiate herself with libertarians or make us think we have a seat at the table, and Trump has. So, boy, when I get to my conclusion, I'm going to piss off everybody. Constituency. And I think this is huge. And Justin Raimondo, who tragically died of cancer, but he was there in 2016, he said, it's not so much I'm for Trump, I'm for the people who support Trump. What is Trump's constituency? The Democratic Party is the party of government. The Republican Party, as useless as it is, and Trump has elevated the party, I think, significantly over what it was. But the Republican Party is the party of the private sector. The Republican Party is the party of the working class, people who work for a living. And that includes Elon Musk. I mean people who work for a living. I'm not saying people who have wage stubs. He is the party. I'm going to add one more factor in. There's so much material here. He's the party. Let me digress here and say, what's the ideology? Because I have to explain that to get to the next point. What's Trump's ideology? What's Harris's ideology? Trump's ideology is populist nationalism. Both populism and nationalism are susceptible to a libertarian interpretation. I think if you're a populist, you have to be a libertarian. If you're a nationalist, well, it depends on what kind of a nationalist you are. But to me, people have the right to get together in groups and freely associate with each other. And the globalists think no. The globalists want everything to be run by a bunch of weird billionaires in Davos, Switzerland, or Belgium, or some crazy European country like that. So what's Kamala's ideology? Left progressivism. Leftism is the hatred of people who are better than you. You want the government to make everybody equal because you're basically a loser and you don't want to get up in the morning and figure out how to improve your life. It's like, we don't need that. We don't need leftism. We don't need a leftist president. It's awful. She's also a progressive, meaning she thinks the government can solve all of our problems. I read a book about it. Government can't get out of its own fucking way. Government can't solve it. So on the level of ideology, which I didn't even have on my checklist, Trump wins. Let me talk back to the constituency issue. Who do these people represent? And I'll close on this section. Harris, it's very clear who Harris represents. She represents the political class, the deep state, globalists, academia, big pharma, big business, and big medicine. So, if you're a libertarian in a swing state, which I'm not, and you're wondering, should I vote? You read Brian Doherty. Sorry, you read Brian Doherty's article. So, I wonder if I should just stay out of this thing. No, Doherty's wrong. Trump is the far better choice for libertarians, but I leave that into your discretion. No, I just point out as a political consultant, New Hampshire's in play. 4 electoral votes. It's a swing of 8 electoral votes. And particularly if you're in New Hampshire, talk about making your vote count, which under normal circumstances I think is sort of bullshitty if you look at the map. New Hampshire's a small state with a lot of libertarians. Trump is surging in the polls there, and that could decide the election between Trump and Harris, particularly if you're in New Hampshire. So I think I've sort of answered the question here, and let me just talk a little bit like who I'm going to vote for. So my vote doesn't matter really to anybody but me, but it matters a lot to me, and the reason is I'm considered to be, hopefully after 45 years of banging my head against the wall, one of the leaders of the movement. So my view of voting is a little bit different. You have no idea how often I'm challenged on social media for people saying, well, yeah, you support Trump. And I always say I voted against Trump twice. Now, it's clear who I want to win the election tonight. I think that's pretty fucking obvious. I think Harris's election would be a disaster. I have disendorsed Harris. I have no problem doing that. But I'm in New York. My vote doesn't count. I have voted Libertarian every election except in 16 when I could not vote for Gary Johnson, and I wrote in Ron Paul's name. So I have done several podcasts about what I would do if I was president on immigration, and I think my position is superior. I've talked about spending cuts, ending nuclear war, ending war. I appreciate the fact that Trump reached out to libertarians. I really do. I thought long and hard about whether to vote for him symbolically. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stick with voting for a hardcore libertarian. The hardest core libertarian with the best policy positions for what we need to do to turn this rapidly sinking country around is Jim Ostrowski. I've written it. I've said it on my podcast. So I'm writing in my name, and that way I can continue my streak of ideological purity. They used to say Caesar's wife have to be pure. But, people out there who aren't a public figure in the Libertarian Party aren't going to be constantly challenged about who you voted for. Feel free to vote for whoever the hell you want to. So I hope this has been illuminating, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you very much, everybody.